So tonight's lesson is on materialism, and we're going to be looking at Luke chapter 12, and specifically the parable of the rich fool. And it's good to be here tonight. I'm excited to share some lessons from this. It was eye-opening for me personally, and looking forward to diving into this. And hopefully, all of you will be encouraged, equally encouraged as I was going through this. So before we jump into the parable, I wanted to give some context, specifically around how we got to this point in the Bible in Luke chapter 12. In the previous chapter, chapter 11, Jesus was actually invited by a Pharisee to come join him for dinner. And it's a really interesting moment in Jesus' ministry because he goes and joins the Pharisee for dinner, which, the Bible alludes to other Pharisees being there as well. And Jesus goes into an all-out rebuke of the Pharisees and the way that they live. And, he's literally sitting at the dinner table with them, staring at them in the face and just rebuking them about how phony they are and how they look at the outside of the cup and they don't clean the inside of the cup. And it, goes through this whole list of, and all of you are probably familiar with this in Luke 11, where Jesus starts many sentences that says, "Woe to you, Pharisees," right? And then he just goes on this list of rebuke after rebuke. And then, as he finishes up dinner, I suppose, he steps outside and there's literally thousands of people in the crowd waiting for Jesus. And the Bible describes it as people literally stepping on top of each other to see him. And so Jesus takes this moment as an opportunity to share some encouragement with the disciples and those who are there. And he, again, warns the people to not be like the people he literally just ate with, the Pharisees. And he makes a comment and says, they just pretend to be godly. And this really stood out to me because oftentimes we can, at least I can, I should speak for myself, can sometimes pretend to be a Christian. And, you go through the motions, you go to church, you read the Bible, you pray, and your heart is just not connected to God. And there's a level of pretending going on there. And so that really stood out to me in the lesson. And then Jesus continues his encouragement to everyone listening there, and he tells them, and as he's finishing up, he's telling them how much God knows them, how much God loves them, and how the Holy Spirit is going to help them. So he comes off on a really strong encouragement, lifting the disciples up and those listening. And then all of a sudden, a man in the crowd interrupts Jesus in his lesson, and he says to Jesus, "Teacher," he said, "tell my brother to divide the family property with me." Now, I don't know what the tone was of this person saying this to Jesus, but you can almost read it as if, it was like a childish type of statement. Like, this is a man who is upset. He's fighting with his brother. He's quarreling with him. And he wants Jesus to step in and tell his brother to share the family property, to share the inheritance. And so Jesus is coming off of this great encouragement. He's interrupted by this person. And all this person is focused on is not the encouragement that Jesus just gave, but he's focused on his inheritance and the money that is supposed to be coming, the money and possessions that are supposed to be coming to him, I suppose, when their father dies. Really interesting moment here. And, Jesus, and as we know, Jesus in the Bible, very loving, very merciful, very graceful. I don't know how I would react to that, but, Jesus gives him a sharp rebuke. In Luke 12:14, it says, "Man, who made me judge or arbiter over you?" And again, don't know what the tone is here, but it is a rebuke, and it is very straight to the point. And right immediately after that rebuke, Jesus goes on to encourage his listeners again by saying in Luke 12:15, "Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." And this is, again, just, a really great encouragement for all of us to really be watchful, be on your guard. And we're going to talk about what covetousness means on the next slide. But, Jesus is really taking a moment here to teach the crowd and warn them about materialism and wealth and the desire to have more and get more. So let's dive into the parable itself. So, he goes on and shares a parable about a rich fool or rich farmer. And this farmer was a successful one, right? He had a very successful year. And you have to ask the question, well, what's wrong with being successful? Well, nothing is actually wrong with that part of it, but it really was all about the motives behind this rich man's heart and what he was trying to accomplish with his success. And if you read deeper into the verses, you see a couple of things going on here around his motives. Number one, covetousness, as Jesus just mentioned, right? So covetousness is just this eager desire to be wealthy or to have possessions, right? So when you think about that word eager or excessive, right, it's like you're constantly thinking about, how do I get rich? How do I make more money, a lot of money, et cetera, right? In today's times, it really is about, whether, something to do with making money, or, maybe I'm trying to be successful on social media and YouTube and TikTok and all these things. And I just need to get rich quickly. So it's that eager and excessive desire to be wealthy and to have lots of things. Secondly, this man lacked a sense of value. And, his value really was on 100% on his possessions and not on God. We'll talk a little bit more about that in another slide. Thirdly, Jesus says, and the Bible warns about this in several places, about laying up treasures for yourself. And this man surely was taking his success and hoarding it all to himself, because he says in the parable, well, I can't store all of this, so what am I going to do? Well, I know what I'll do. I'll just build bigger barns and store my wealth in those barns, right? So it's all about him. And then lastly, Jesus warns the crowd through this parable and says, this man was not being rich towards God. And again, we'll talk about what that looks like, not being rich towards God, in another slide. But because of these motives, in Luke 12:20, Jesus actually says this man's soul was taken from him. And that's pretty deep, right? Again, this is a man who was successful, nothing wrong with his success, but the motives behind that success were essentially causing this man's life, more importantly, his soul. And so you have to ask yourself the question, are you more worried about making a living than making a life with God? And it's a really deep question. I thought about this for a long time myself, and I really, through doing this lesson, have started to challenge my mind and my thinking about how much value I put on my career and my own success. And it really, truly is eye-opening. So let's talk about what it means to not being rich towards God. As I was thinking about this, I was trying to think of, what would a visual be for all of us to really understand what it means to not be rich towards God. So I thought about my own schedule, my own routine, and I thought about, the lowest point that I might be in my Christianity, where I'm just not spending enough time with God. And this is kind of what it looks like. And I'm not going to read through each of these line items, but the long story short, when you look at this schedule for one day, I am literally spending 3% of my time with God, 97% doing other things. This is a perfect example of not being rich towards God. And this is what you all should not be striving to replicate, right? I don't know what the right number is. I'm not going to, tell you what that number is. That's for you to decide. But I can tell you that 3% is not the right number. That is definitely not the right number. And so, I need to work on making sure that my motives behind everything I do is godly, has the intent to please God and to benefit his kingdom, his church, his people, my family, etc. So what are some lessons from the rich fool, right? So number one, don't worry about getting rich or you'll fall into a trap. So 1 Timothy 6:9 says, those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Some people eager for money have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. And so the key words here are those who want to get rich, right? That desire, the desire to become rich is the problem here. There are plenty of Christians that God is so blessed to be well off. I would argue that everyone who lives in America is well off when you look at other countries, right? So I think we all have a level of richness ourselves that we could be thankful for and utilize the resources God has given us to bless others. Secondly, don't lack a sense of value. So as I mentioned, the rich man really valued his possessions and looked at them almost as a god. And so we have to be really careful that our value truly is on God, right? Paul said it really well when he said, I've learned to be content in all circumstances, whether I'm poor or whether I'm rich, I've learned to be content. And that is really such a great example, right? Because at the end of the day, if we all have Christ in our lives, we truly are rich because we know where we're headed to when we die and go to the next life. Really good lesson here, good point here. Stop looking at what everyone else has. It's easy to look across the fence at the next door neighbor or at your coworker or at your boss or at whomever, maybe even at another brother, and think to yourself, well, I want that. And you want it so bad that you're willing to sacrifice your own morals and your own Christianity to go get it. So it's really important to just not look around, think about your own blessings that God has already given you, which, as I mentioned, is a lot for us living here in America. 1 Thessalonians 5:18 talks about being thankful. I try to teach my girls, who I hope are listening right now all the time, we are so blessed. We have so much to be thankful for. We just spent an entire day in Grandpa and Grandma's pool, swimming, having fun, having a blast as a family. Not everyone gets to do that in this world. And so we are blessed for simple things like that. And lastly, Hebrews 11:6 tells us that those who diligently seek God, He is going to reward them. And this is a great encouragement because as we're seeking God, not only are we pleasing Him, but we're helping other people, and the reward is coming back to us in many different ways. So as the final encouragement, if you really want to be rich in all aspects of life, then you need to give. This is a spiritual truth, right? Proverbs 11:24. One person gives freely, but gets even richer. Another person doesn't give what they should, but gets even poorer. Acts 20, it is more blessed to give than to receive. And 2 Corinthians 6:9, remember this, whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows generously will also reap generously. I personally have tested this spiritual truth out, and I can tell you firsthand that when you give your time, your money, your energy, whatever, to others, to help others, and to further God's kingdom, the reward always comes back tenfold. It is a spiritual truth. And, if we would just give more of ourselves, first to God and then to others, I can guarantee you your life will be rich, not only in the next, but also in this life. So I hope this was an encouragement for you all. Hopefully you enjoy the conversations, and I look forward to being with you in those conversations. Thank you.